You don't wake up. You resurrect from a pile of straw, fleas, and whatever passed for a blanket last night. Your bed is more of a hay coffin than a sleeping arrangement. Comfort? That's a luxury for the dead. Before your eyes open, the cold punches you in the feet, then your fingers, then your soul. There's no window to check the time, just the cock crowing like it's paid to annoy, or worse, the church bell, which means work, prayer, and possibly hunger. There is no coffee. Let that sink in. No aroma of roasted beans, no warm mug between your hands. Just a faint hope that someone boiled water. And even that hope has lice. Instead, you get a chunk of yesterday's bread, dense enough to break teeth and possibly laws of physics. You gnaw at it like a desperate squirrel, tasting barley, mold, and the bitterness of being alive before the 17th century. Hygiene? A splash of cold water on your face if there's any to spare. Brushing teeth? With what? A stick and some prayers? You smell like a medieval apology, and no one cares. Your mirror is a metal plate or a puddle, and it reflects someone who already lost the day before it began. Mornings weren't peaceful. They were survival, and if you didn't move fast enough, someone moved you, with a stick, a slap, or a sermon. Still, you rose. Because in a world before coffee, mornings weren't a choice. They were a punishment with no snooze button. Let's get one thing straight. Coffee didn't waltz into Europe until the 1600s, and even then, people were suspicious. Some called it Satan's brew. Others thought it was a Muslim conspiracy. One pope had to literally taste it before giving it the Christian green light. Thanks, Clement VIII. So what did people drink in the morning before the beans blessed their veins? Ale. Yes. Beer. Not because they were party animals, but because water could kill you. Imagine starting your day with a warm mug of low-alcohol sludge, brewed by your neighbor's wife, who also churned butter and buried her sixth child last month. That's your breakfast beverage. If you lived in a colder place, you might have had gruel, which is less food, more regret. Imagine oat soup, but sadder. Thin, lukewarm, and barely flavored with salt, if you were lucky. Gruel didn't nourish. It mocked you. In some parts of the ancient world, morning meant onion water. Yes, water. Infused with onions. Because if you're already miserable, why not make your breath a biological weapon? Tea? Maybe? If you lived in China? Cocoa? Only if you were an Aztec warrior. But for most of history, your morning drink was a mix of desperation, bacteria, and divine hope. And yet, people lived. They prayed, they plowed, they married, on onion water and porridge. Makes your lukewarm office espresso feel like a divine elixir, doesn't it? There's no snooze button, no soft vibration on your nightstand. Just a living, screaming, feathered demon, the rooster, programmed by biology to ruin your dreams at exactly the worst moment. If you lived in a medieval village, this was your alarm. A frantic, existential screech from a bird who slept better than you. And if you were lucky, that was all. In monasteries, the bell would toll, a slow, metallic threat echoing across stone walls, announcing, God is watching, and you're late. And if you were a servant, or a novice monk, or just a child with unfortunate parents, the cold bucket technique was standard. Imagine, you're dreaming of bread that doesn't chip teeth, and suddenly ice water crashes over your face like divine punishment. No warning, just wet panic and the sound of someone else's laughter. Why so dramatic? Because time, back then, wasn't yours. It belonged to the sun, the bell tower, the landowner, the abbess, the fields, the chores. People didn't wake up, they were summoned. Timekeeping was an elite activity. If you had a sundial, congrats. You were probably rich, literate, or dead. For the rest, it was all about rhythm. Rooster, bell, hoofbeats, work songs, prayer chants. Your body became a clock. Your stomach grumbled when it was time to eat. Your back ached when it was time to stop. And your eyelids closed only when the darkness swallowed the world. There was no such thing as being a morning person. You woke up because you had to, because not waking up meant punishment, or starvation, or shame. The morning wasn't a fresh start, it was a debt to pay, and you began each day in deficit. And yet, somehow, among the cold splashes and rooster screams, people sang. Not always, not often, but sometimes. You'd hear it. A chant in the monastery, a lullaby turning into a harvest song, a rhythm kept with hands slapping dough at dawn. They didn't have coffee, but they had each other. And sometimes that was enough to get up. You've barely opened your eyes. Your stomach is still negotiating the gruel situation. And before you've even scratched the lice bites behind your ear, someone is already yelling your name. Because in the old world, the day starts with labor, not the metaphorical kind. We're talking manual, physical, sweat and callus-inducing tasks. Before breakfast, before sunlight, and definitely before joy. If you're a peasant, congratulations, you've won the dirt lottery. Your first task, feed the animals, who, unlike you, are not late and not negotiable. Chickens need scattering, pigs need slop, cows need milking, and all of them express hunger like furry little tyrants with no HR department. Still in your tunic, you step into mud. Always mud. Mud on your ankles, mud in your soul. And in winter, frozen mud, which is like regular mud, but meaner. If you're in a city, slightly better, or not. You might be an apprentice, which means your job is everything your master doesn't want to do. Clean the tools, fetch the water, scrub the floor with a rag that smells like centuries of disappointment. In a castle? Oh boy, you're a scullery maid, and your job is to wake up before the nobles, just to stoke their fires, boil their water, and clean yesterday's feasting aftermath, which smells like rotten meat and lost morals. Some jobs start before dawn, like bakers. They're the unsung heroes of the medieval morning, rising in the darkness to mix, knead, bake, and not die of heat stroke in a fire-powered oven. Their reward? A burnt crust and early onset back pain. And let's not forget the children. Yes, kids work too. At 5, they're scaring crows from the crops. At 7, they're spinning wool or sweeping stalls. At 10, they've already seen things you wouldn't show on late-night TV. There's no take your time or ease into the day. There is only move or you don't eat. The body aches, the breath fogs, and your fingers barely move. But still, you go. Because that's the deal. You rise, you work, you survive. No meditation app, no breakfast smoothie, just frostbite and obligation. And somehow, you make it to mid-morning. Let's talk about smell. Not the nice kind. No vanilla candles, no eucalyptus showers. The historical kind. The kind that enters your nostrils, slaps your dignity, and stays for lunch. Because mornings, before modern hygiene, were an olfactory ambush. You start the day already smelling like a long-forgotten root cellar. Your body hasn't been properly washed in days, maybe weeks. Not because you're lazy, but because bathing was seen as dangerous. Yes, dangerous. People believed water could open your pores and let diseases sneak in. So instead of scrubbing, they layered fabric, perfumes, prayers. The result? A society that stank together and called it normal. Your breath? A weapon. No toothbrush. At best, you'd chew a twig or rinse your mouth with vinegar, which doesn't help much if you've been eating onions, salted fish, or whatever died near your village recently. Your clothes? Unwashed wool, thick, scratchy, and marinated in last week's sweat. Changing clothes daily wasn't a thing. You wore the same tunic until it could stand up on its own and file for emancipation. Underwear? Optional. Soap? Rare. Water? Cold and usually shared by the family, the animals, and sometimes a frog. Let's not forget the public latrines. If you were in a city, you might relieve yourself in a communal pit that smelled like Dante's unpublished 11th Circle. In the countryside, it was a wooden box over a hole, or just a bush. No toilet paper, just moss, rags, or, if you were lucky, nothing. So when people greeted each other in the morning, it wasn't with a smile. It was with a cautious distance, and perhaps the silent question, is that me, or is it you? And yet, in that haze of sweat, dirt, and desperation, they kept going. They loved, they laughed, they married even. Apparently, human connection survives even the worst smells. Makes your morning deodorant feel like a miracle, doesn't it? You're awake, you're cold, you smell like a wet goat that's lost hope, and now it's time to eat. But don't get excited. This isn't brunch. There are no croissants, no avocado toast, no oat milk lattes with cinnamon foam. There's just survival food, edible only because dying on an empty stomach is worse. If you're a peasant, and statistically you are, breakfast is bread, but not the crusty, Instagrammable kind. This bread is dark, dense, heavy, made from rye, barley, or whatever didn't rot during the last harvest. It's so tough you could use it to defend yourself from a Viking raid. Want butter? That's adorable. You get lard, animal fat scraped from yesterday's stew pot. It glistens with mystery and regret. You smear it on like cold glue and tell yourself it's a treat. If it's winter, you might get porridge, which is like oatmeal, but without flavor, texture, or joy. It's warm, yes, but so is swamp water. If you're lucky, and we mean really lucky, there's cheese. Not creamy, dreamy cheese. Hard cheese. The kind that squeaks against your teeth and smells like medieval despair. In coastal towns, breakfast might include dried fish, salted to the point of near mummification. You chew it slowly while contemplating mortality. And to drink? You already know. Ale, milk, or thin broth. Water's risky. Tea is mythical. Coffee is centuries away and would honestly feel like sorcery right now. This meal doesn't energize. It doesn't comfort. It simply exists, like a gray cloud on your tongue, a reminder that you're alive, and that's your reward. And yet, somehow people still said grace. They thanked the heavens for this meal, because gratitude, back then, wasn't about luxury. It was about not starving. So next time your toast is slightly burnt, remember, you could have been gnawing on fermented barley with a side of salted despair. You've eaten your sadness porridge. You've splashed your face with guilt water. Now comes the next sacred ritual of the pre-coffee morning. Getting dressed. Not choosing, not matching. Just dressing. Because fashion, in most of history, was not about expression. It was about not freezing to death or being fined for public indecency. Let's start with the basics. You own, at best, 2 sets of clothes. One is on your body. The other is hanging somewhere, stiff from last week's sweat, waiting its turn like a condemned prisoner. If you're poor, which again, you probably are, you wear wool. Always wool. Hot in summer, scratchy in winter, moist forever. Wool that smells like sheep memories and holds the essence of every activity you've done for the past month. Underwear? A myth for most. You throw on a linen shift if you're lucky, then layer up like you're preparing for a medieval fashion apocalypse. Your pants? Baggy, tied with string, and designed to confuse you. Your tunic? Oversized and shapeless. Think potato sack with ambition. Your shoes? Made of leather barely and already wet from the mud you stepped in on your way to the chickens. Accessories? Of course, a belt to hold your knife, a hat to pretend you don't have lice, and a coat if the family goat didn't eat it last night. And you dress in the dark or near dark because candles cost money and sunlight doesn't arrive on command. There are no closets, just hooks or boxes or floor piles. Clothing isn't seasonal, it's eternal, until it disintegrates or gets stolen during a famine. And let's be honest, no one looks good. Even nobles, dressed in velvet and gold, are sweating profusely and itching constantly. Style is for portraits. Real life smells like mildew and compromise. And yet, every morning, people dressed. For work, for mass, for marriage, for death. They wrap themselves in cloth and in purpose, one layer at a time. So the next time you stare at your closet and say, I have nothing to wear, just remember they had nothing to wear and nowhere to hide. In our world, mourning is marketed. Sunrise yoga, motivational podcasts, that cheesy rise and grind energy. But for most of human history, mourning wasn't a vibe. It was a ritual, a rhythm, a kind of sacred burden carried by millions of sore backs and blistered feet. Because before electricity, before freedom of time, before coffee, mourning meant obedience. If you lived in a monastery, the day began with matins, the first of 7 daily prayers. You'd rise in the darkness, chant Latin half asleep, and offer your breath to God before your brain even knew who you were. If you lived in a village, the church bell told you when to move, not your own body, not your schedule, the bell. The holy metronome of your existence. If you were enslaved or indentured or simply poor, which again covers most of history, the morning meant reporting to someone else's authority, a master, a lord, a boss, someone richer, better fed, and infinitely more annoying. Even your breakfast, that pathetic porridge, was eaten with awareness that the day would not bring comfort, that rest would not come easily, that your life was tied to the land, the sky, the seasons, and the survival of those around you. And yet, morning also meant hope. Reluctant, rough-edged hope. A new chance to feed your children, to survive one more day, to fix the roof before the next storm, to avoid the plague, the tax collector, or the neighbor who keeps accusing your goats of blasphemy. Sometimes the only joy in the morning was the rhythm, the slap of dough in the kitchen, the hum of voices in the field, the slow echo of prayer in stone chapels. They didn't have alarms, but they had purpose. They didn't have caffeine, but they had each other. They didn't have peace, but they had a pattern, and sometimes that was enough to keep going. So next time your calendar app gives you anxiety, remember, they started their days with no screens, no coffee, no control, just rhythm, reverence, and the quiet, reluctant courage to keep rising. Let's be honest. If any of us woke up in 1423 in a cold stone hut, chewing bark bread, wearing damp wool, we'd cry, loudly, and then tweet about it if our fingers weren't frozen. But they didn't complain. Not like we do. Not because they didn't suffer. Oh, they did. But because suffering was normal, expected, shared. It wasn't something to fix. It was something to carry. Your back hurt? So did your neighbors. You lost a child? So did half the village. You had to work before the sun rose? That's life. That's the rhythm. To them, pain wasn't an interruption. It was a sign you were still here. They found pride in endurance. A father who fed his family through a brutal winter. a mother who spun thread until her fingers cracked, a child who walked 6 miles to fetch wood, barefoot, in snow. No applause, no gold stars, just quiet, generational resilience. Complaining meant weakness, or worse, ingratitude. So they told jokes instead, dark ones, dry ones, the kind only hungry people understand. They sang, not because life was beautiful, but because they were still breathing. Songs at dawn, lullabies by fire, chants echoing in fields like prayers wrapped in dirt. They prayed, even when angry, especially then. Faith wasn't a spiritual accessory, it was a survival mechanism. And when they did break, when grief or cold or famine cracked their resolve, they broke together. In silence, in prayer, in the soft clutch of a friend who had nothing to offer but presence. And maybe that's why we romanticize them. Not because they were cleaner, smarter, or happier, but because they didn't give up. They woke up every single day without coffee, without comfort, and still found reasons to go on. That's not nostalgia. That's perspective. You wake up, not to a rooster, not to a bell, but to a gentle buzz, a playlist you chose, a bed that doesn't stab you, and sheets that smell vaguely of detergent and middle-class dignity. You stretch, you yawn, you check your phone, because that's your version of prayer now. And then, without earning it, without foraging or fighting or boiling questionable water, you make coffee. From a machine, or a capsule, or a drive-through window manned by someone who woke up before you. You sip it. It's warm. It's dark. It doesn't have onion in it. You sit in silence, maybe in gratitude, maybe in mild despair about the workday ahead. But you sit, because you can. You don't have to chase chickens. You don't have to shovel manure before breakfast. You don't have to kneel in a frozen chapel or milk anything by hand. You don't even have to talk to anyone if you don't want to. You have coffee, you have plumbing, you have socks that match. And sure, your brain is loud, the world is weird, your inbox is a war zone. But in this quiet moment, mug in hand, body intact, roof above you, you are the dream of someone who never tasted caffeine, never knew soft fabric, never had 5 extra minutes. They survived so you could complain, and laugh, and binge-watch documentaries about how awful their lives were. So sip slowly, and when your alarm goes off tomorrow, remember, you don't live in 1347. You live in the miracle of modern misery, and at least it comes with coffee.